Hello, I want to welcome everybody and thank you for joining this presentation of Dena'inaq Huch'ulyeshi, the Dena'ina Way of Living. My name is Aaron Leggett and I'm Dena'ina Athabascan from the native village of Eklutna. For the last 7 years I've served as one of the co-curators on Dena'inaq Huch'ulyeshi, the first exhibition ever on Dena'ina Athabascan culture, on display at the Anchorage Museum from September 15, 2013 to January 12, 2014. This exhibition told the story of the Dena'ina, the indigenous inhabitants of south-central Alaska. It explores Dena'ina identity and society, spiritual beliefs, connection to the land, history since contact, and cultural renewal. This exhibit was created in collaboration with a Dena'ina Advisory Committee and the assistance of the National Park Service Lake Clark Division and the Alaska Native Heritage Center. First, let us orient ourselves to today what is called Dena'ina, the Dena'ina Homeland. It encompasses 41,000 square miles of south-central Alaska. As the only northern Athabascan people whose traditional territory bordered saltwater, most Dena'ina have access to the natural resources of the marine waters and tidelands, as well as rivers, lakes, forests, and mountains. This diverse subarctic environment provided seasonal abundance, followed by periods of scarcity. The Dena'ina were probably the most numerous of all Alaskan Athabascans, with an aboriginal population of perhaps 4,000 to 5,000. And this is a more detailed shot of Dena'ina, or the Dena'ina Homeland, and it's divided. The Dena'ina Homeland is divided into 4 mutually intelligible dialects: the Upper Inlet Dena'ina, the Outer Inlet Dena'ina, the Iliamna Dena'ina, and the Inland Dena'ina. There are 4 dialects, but we all speak one language, Dena'ina. This exhibition opened to an iconic Dena'ina scene of a Dena'ina fish camp. It is a life-size recreation of a Dena'ina family fish camp on Lake Clark. This scene embodies the past in the present as the Dena'ina continue to practice this centuries-old tradition. This scene is based on the Evanoff family fish camp in Non-Dalton, and the Anchorage Museum worked closely with the family on recreating as many details as possible, including photographing and recording the sounds of the fish camp. Also, at this time, I would like to mention that many of the multimedia elements from the exhibition are available online at the Anchorage Museum's Tools for Teacher website. I'll point out some of these features during my talk, and at the end I will show you how to find the website. For example, you can watch a slideshow of how the Dena'ina put up fish, which includes this image. What we know about Dena'ina origins, what we know about the origins of the Dena'ina people, we have learned from archaeology, oral tradition, and linguistics. From these sources of information, it has been theorized that the Dena'ina reached Cook Inlet in 2 migrations. They first came through either Rainy Pass or Ptarmigan Pass into the Susitna River country, where they occupied the coastal area around Dena'inaq as well as Knik. Later, the Dena'ina migrated south to Iliamna Lake, eventually crossing over to the Kenai Peninsula. The Dena'ina have lived in south-central Alaska for at least the last 1,000 years. Dena'ina Chilanch, being Dena'ina. In this section of the exhibition, we talk about Dena'ina identity, starting with infancy, moving through the rites of passage into adulthood, and concluding with ceremonies associated with the end of life. Here we see how the gallery dealing with the Dena'ina identity was laid out in the exhibition. The case in the center holds a women's caribou hide dress and a men's caribou hide tunic. This type of clothing was worn by the Dena'ina during the summer until the later part of the 19th century. During the first year of life, a Dena'ina baby spent most of its time in a birch bark cradle or chair or a moss bag made of sealskin. Very young children were cared for primarily by their mothers and other female relatives. The Dena'ina believed that by giving babies certain amulets, that they would help a person grow to have certain attributes. On this set of baby amulets, we see a ptarmigan foot, which was believed to give the individual the attributes to become a fast runner. Here we see a young child's doll. This was made in Non-Dalton probably in the middle part of the 20th century, and young girls would learn how to make these smaller versions of the adult clothing so they could practice their sewing skills. Dena'ina elders were honored for their wisdom and skills, and they provided guidance to young people. In this case here, we see a set of puberty drinking tubes. When a girl entered puberty, she was secluded from the community for a period of time where she learned how to become a woman and would be ready for marriage. And the drinking tubes were used by the young girls, and what they would do is they would put them around their neck and they would use them to drink from water containers because it was believed that young girls shouldn't drink directly from or their lips shouldn't touch the water. Young boys also used these as well as other Dena'ina people would use them while they were out hunting and traveling. And it was told to me that the reason that they would use these were two reasons. One, if a person came to a fast-moving, cold mountain stream, they could use the tube to get down closer to the water and drink from the creek and not chap their lips. The other reason that it was explained to me was that if you came to an area that had slower-moving water, you could use the tube to get down below the surface of the water, and you could get clean drinking water that way. A young man's first marriage required that he perform bride service for a woman's parents. Parents insisted that a young man prove his ability to support their daughter by demonstrating his hunting skills. Accumulated wealth was necessary as proof of a man's competence. Another way that Dena'ina people would show their affection was to create what are called love songs. And in the exhibition, we have an example of one of these. This was composed by the late Dena'ina elder Shem Pete. And in the exhibit, you have the ability to pick up the headset, push a button, and listen to the song. You can also go online to the Tools for Teacher website and hear the song that was composed by Shem. And this is a shot of the panel that was in the exhibition explaining when he composed this song in Dena'inaq around 1915 as he walked on the trail between Dena'inaq and Subsistence Station and explains what the lyrics in the song mean. And this is also available on the website as well. Dena'inaq Huch'ulyeshi, the old Dena'ina beliefs. In this part of the exhibition, we deal with Dena'ina spirituality before contact. The Dena'ina believed that everything had a spirit and that they were surrounded by a watchful world. It was also a dangerous world governed by unga, or an elaborate system of rules and taboos. To ignore these rules was to court misfortune or disaster. To observe and respect them brought success or luck. Specific Dena'ina sites were believed to have power as well. For example, this photo shows Dena'inaq, a set of large boulders on the upper Talakwana Trail, where the Dena'ina would seek refuge in bad weather and leave offerings as a way of thanking it for protecting them during the bad weather. Within the Dena'ina community, there were specialists who could publicly display their relationship to the spiritual, relationship to spiritual power, which was usually used for a practical end. Among these specialists were the Ulagan, or today what we would call shamans. Men or women who could cure or cause illness, men or women could cure or cause illness and locate game. Shamanistic power was obtained through dreaming. Shamans used canes, masks, rattles, and medicine dolls to help assist them. Another one of the tools used by Dena'ina shamans were specially carved wooden trays that were used to mix various items to help cure the sick, and they were traditionally burnt after they were used. This tray here belonged to my great-great-grandfather, Eklutna Alex, the last shaman from Eklutna. Dena'ina Huch'ulyeshi, clanspeople and leaders. Each Dena'ina community was made up of Dena'ina Huch'ulyeshi, and all Dena'ina belonged to a matrilineal clan. Matrilineal means that your clan is inherited from your mother, and each clan had a leader called a Keshka, or literally translated as rich man. In traditional Dena'ina society, men became leaders through the accumulation and redistribution of wealth. Their authority was legitimized by the display of skill, knowledge, and generosity. This necklace was handed down through several generations of Keshka from Subsistence Station and Dena'inaq. This belt here, this belonged also to my great-great-grandfather, Eklutna Alex. So in addition to being the Keshka, or one of the Keshka from Eklutna, he was also one of the last traditional leaders. The ultimate sign of status and wealth in Dena'ina society, and also in most northern Athabascan societies, was dentalium shells. Those are those little white shells that you see on the belt here, and also on this slide, the previous slide on the necklace. What the Dena'ina would do is they would obtain these in trade from the Atna, their Athabascan neighbors to the northeast of them. The Atna would trade with the Tlingit in southeast Alaska, who would trade with the Haida, and then further down, all the way down to the on the northwest coast, down around Vancouver Island with the Kwakwaka'wakw, where they were harvested. And so they worked their way up the northwest coast and into the interior of Alaska, and they're a small white tubular mollusk that grows on the bottom of the ocean, and these would be gathered together and traded, and then they would be added to necklaces and belts and strung together later on with glass seed beads. And even today, dentalium shells are still viewed by Athabascans as a sign of rank and status and wealth, because it's very hard to find a large, smooth dentalium, and when you do, you usually have to pay pretty high prices for them. So in addition to trading with the Atna for dentalium shells, they would also, the Dena'ina would also trade with their neighbors to the south of them and the southwest of them. So in the southwestern part of the state, we have the Yupik that they would trade with along parts of Bristol Bay and the Alaska Peninsula. And then in the southern area below them, on Kodiak Island, the furthest tip of Lower Cook Inlet and Prince William Sound were the Alutiiq or Sukbiak, and they would trade for items like stone lamps, and these were 2 stone lamps that were collected in Dena'ina territory from Dena'ina people, but Dena'ina people say that they didn't make stone lamps, they only traded for them. But when the Dena'ina, when trade broke down, they were known to go to war. During warfare, the Dena'ina carried war clubs made of caribou antler, like the one seen here, and had them soaked in oil to make them heavier, and these were used up until the mid-19th century. This particular caribou antler club now belongs to the National Museum of Denmark in Copenhagen. Yo catch das see ye, yo catch das see ye, living from the land and with the seasons. The Dena'ina had a deep knowledge of their land in each season. For the Dena'ina, the seasonal cycle started in the spring. More than 90 names for the various months of the year have been recorded from different Dena'ina groups. Here we see a diagram of a Dena'ina seasonal round, which highlights the inland Dena'ina names for the various months and activities and plants and animals that were harvested throughout the year. And this is a shot of the second gallery in the exhibition, and you can see that it's laid out in each section, starting in the spring and moving all the way through the year. During the spring, the Dena'ina hunted migratory birds, including ducks, geese, swans, and cranes. One of these methods that was used were bows with blunt-tipped arrows. Blunt-tipped arrows were used since they provide more surface area to kill the animal, are easier to retrieve, and don't damage the bird's skins, which would be used for winter clothing. And these blunt arrows came from my village of Eklutna and were collected in the 1930s by Cornelius Osgood, who was working for the Yale Peabody Museum and was one of the collections of items that we borrowed for the exhibit came from Yale. The Cook Inlet Dena'ina used a unique method to hunt beluga whale called a yoi kol, or a beluga spearing platform. The yoi kol was a single large spruce tree embedded upside down in the mud flats at ebb tide and secured with lines of moose hide smeared with pitch. A hunter, armed with a harpoon, stationed himself in the nest formed by the upturned tree's roots and waited for the belugas to approach with the flood tide in pursuit of salmon. After harpooning a whale, the hunter signaled to his partners waiting on the shore with kayaks. They chased the wounded animal until it died and then hauled it back to their village. There it was butchered and the oil was rendered for fat. So again, the Dena'ina, being the only Athabascans that live on salt water, did hunt marine mammals, mostly beluga whales, but also some seals and sea lions. And in the exhibition, we recreated a full-size diorama of a beluga hunter on a harpoon stand, harpooning the whales. And in all our research, we've discovered that we don't think there's anywhere else, certainly in Alaska and perhaps in North America, that Native Americans hunted whales in this fashion. The reason that the Dena'ina hunted the whales this way is that although we did have access to open skin boats and kayaks, traveling on Turnagain Arm, Knik Arm, and Cook Inlet with its large tidal changes can be extremely dangerous. And even today, there's not a lot of small boats that travel up and down the inlet. And so the Dena'ina did cross back and forth from one side of Cook Inlet to the other in these boats, but they didn't spend huge amounts of time on the open ocean because they knew how dangerous it was. This image here, this is a full-size beluga spear. It's believed to be the only one known in existence. It comes from the Ethnological Museum in Berlin, and it was in the exhibition. It's over, I think, 9 feet long. And the Dena'ina gave up this style of hunting in the 1880s or early 1890s when they started to have access to high-powered rifles like 45 70s and 45 90s. The man who was collecting for the Ethnological Museum was a man by the name of Adrian Jacobson, and he went throughout Alaska collecting for the museums, or for the museum from different areas in Alaska. And he collected this right at the tail end of when this style of hunting went out of fashion. Shani is the Dena'ina word for the summertime. For the Dena'ina, summer brought an abundance of salmon, as salmon were the most important staple for virtually all Dena'ina communities. All 5 species of Alaskan salmon were harvested by the cook in the Dena'ina. Women played a key role managing the process of hundreds of fish each year. The primary tool that was used to cut fish was called the bashla, like the one seen here. On the Tools for Teacher website, you can watch a short video of Mary Jensen of Pedro Bay using a bashla to process salmon and a slideshow of how to put up fish. The other late summer and early fall activity was harvesting berries. About 20 kinds were used, mostly for food or for medicinal purposes. Raw or cooked berries were mixed with oil to preserve them for later use. The land provides many foods that are still important to a traditional Dena'ina diet. The Dena'ina meal, pictured here, includes moose nose soup, roasted beaver meat, fried spruce hen, and 2 types of salmon. Berries are the main ingredient in nivagi, or Indian ice cream. You can watch a short clip of the Dena'ina dining film on the Tools for Teacher website. And of all the things that we did in the exhibition, hands down, the most feedback that we got was on this particular dining table projection. What we did was, about a year and a half ago, we rented a space here in Anchorage where we got together 8 of our advisors to cook a traditional meal and to sit down and be filmed from overhead eating the meal. And each one of us had a microphone, and in the film, which was done all in real time in the exhibition, which runs about 45 minutes, we're discussing the various foods that are here at that meal, and also stories associated with going out on the land. And you can hear people talking in both English and Dena'ina. And again, when it was in the exhibition and it was projected overhead down onto a full-size table, it really did look like you were sitting there with the meal, and people really seemed to enjoy a window into this Dena'ina meal. For the Dena'ina, late summer and early fall brought a transition from fishing and gathering plants to hunting big game. Extended families traveled upriver and into the mountains and established hunting camps. Caribou were of particular importance. The quiver shown here is from the 1850s and depicts men hunting caribou and Dall sheep. Trapping in the mountains was another important activity in the fall. In early September, while the men were hunting, women and girls could be found setting snares for coonshaw, or Arctic ground squirrels, or shkut, hoary marmots. And in the exhibition, we created a hands-on interactive where visitors could look at the quiver, and then they could go to the interactive, and they could try to guess the various animals that were depicted on the quiver, and then they could flip up the flap and see what the actual animal was and its Dena'ina name. During the 20th century, moose replaced caribou as the dominant big game mammal, or big game animal, I should say, in most of the Dena'ina homeland. Visitors to the exhibition were able to learn several Dena'ina phrases at the display pictured here. This activity is also available on the Tools for Teacher website. Heiyi, or in Dena'ina, winter. With the arrival of winter, the Dena'ina returned to their villages. The Dena'ina viewed the wintertime as a time to gather during the coldest and darkest part of the year to celebrate and commemorate with potlatches. Although this year I think it wouldn't have been certainly the coldest part of the year. We were having quite a year, actually. The most elaborate Dena'ina potlatches, katit, were memorial feasts for the dead. Memorial potlatches attracted guests from many other villages. They were a matter of honor and prestige for the host family. This dress pictured here is an example of the special clothing that would have been worn during potlatches during the early to mid 20th century. Winter was also a time for storytelling. Here to the right of the case with the snowshoes and winter boots, we recreated a part of a nichith, or winter home, where visitors could listen to a selection of Dena'ina suktu, or stories. You can listen to these stories in Dena'ina in English on the Tools for Teacher website. And here's a picture of people sitting there in front of the iPads or with the headsets on, getting a sense of the different stories and hearing the language being spoken. One of the things that our advisory committee really wanted to focus on in the exhibition was the use of the Dena'ina language. Unfortunately, today there's less than 25 fluent speakers of the Dena'ina language, and in fact, in the time that since the exhibitions opened in September, we actually lost 2 of the last remaining fluent speakers in Dena'inaq. So it's with a bit of sadness that we have that, but the good news about the Dena'ina language is that there's a wealth of resources that are available in books and also online where you can learn the language. So there's a group of maybe, 20 of us, I would say active Dena'ina language learners who have been studying the language for 8 or 9 years, some maybe a little bit longer, that are working hard to work with the last fluent speakers of the language to document as much as we can before it disappears. But we wanted to see the use of the language throughout the exhibition, and in fact, every object in the exhibition had its Dena'ina name from the community that it came from, and there were the interactives that focused on highlighting the Dena'ina language. If we went through the exhibition, we're not saying that you would know the Dena'ina language, but you might pick up a few words here and there, which is important to increasing that public awareness. And then this picture here is just the set of snowshoes that were in the winter display case. Yagalishta Huch'ulyeshi, things that are made well. The Dena'ina have a long tradition as skilled craftspeople, painting on rock walls, on arrows and paddles, on caribou hide quivers and clothing was a widely practiced art. Red and black and sometimes blue were the preferred colors. The Dena'ina also used dyes extracted from plant materials with black, red, blue, and yellow predominating. Beyond painting, a catalog of visual arts of the Dena'ina would also include basketry, both folded and twined spruce root baskets, exquisite porcupine quill work, beadwork, and incising on bone. And this is just one of many examples that we had in the exhibition. And this is a knife sheath that comes from the National Museum of Finland and is an example of superb Dena'ina craftsmanship. Again, the sheath is made from tanned caribou hide decorated with finely woven bands of dyed porcupine quills. The Dena'ina made their tools, and here we see a set of carving knives and a chisel, again used and made by my great-great-grandfather, Reclutin Alex. Dena'ina Huch'ulyeshi, since the arrival of the underwater people. Europeans first entered Dena'ina territory in 1778 when Captain James Cook sailed into Tiqaqnu, now called Cook Inlet. The Dena'ina paddled out to Cook's ship and traded with Cook's men. Later, several of the crew came on land near what today is called Point Possession. A vocabulary recorded by one of Cook's men is the first recording of the Dena'ina language. The Dena'ina called these early explorers the Dena'ina, the underwater people, because as the large sailing ships approached the shore, Dipping below the horizon, it appeared to the Dena'ina, who had never seen such large ships, that they came out from under the water. This dull sheep horn bowl or ladle is the oldest museum object that we had in the exhibition and was collected from the Dena'ina by Captain Cook in 1778. And it is now owned by the British Museum. In the last section of the exhibition, we examined key events in Dena'ina history with an illustrated timeline. The events in this timeline refer to the intensity of change the Dena'ina have experienced since Captain Cook's voyage. You can find this illustrated timeline on the Tools for Teacher website. Nakantu redus. The tide is coming back in, or cultural renewal. For the last 30 years, the Dena'ina have actively worked to document and perpetuate their history and culture. Extensive recordings, books, and archives have resulted from these endeavors. The Dena'ina Language Institutes have brought together fluent Dena'ina speakers and language learners to carry on the language. Dena'ina communities have organized festivals, dance groups, and culture camps. And in this slide right here, this is just a small sampling of some of the books that Dena'ina people have worked on over the last 40 years. Some of them have become quite well known in Alaska, especially A Dena'ina Legacy, Kutlagi Sukdu, the collected writings of Peter Californsky, and Shempete's Alaska, the territory of the Upper Cook and the Dena'ina, which is an ethnogeography of Upper Cook Inlet and is really quite remarkable with its documentation of native place names. In 2008, the Anchorage Museum commissioned Helen Dick from Lime Village, or excuse me, in 2009, Dena'ina elder Helen Dick and her family were commissioned by the Anchorage Museum to construct a traditional Dena'ina whitefish trap, and the process was documented by both film and photographs. You can watch the short version of the film on the Tools for Teacher website, in addition to other Dena'ina language features on the website that I've mentioned. In this picture here, Helen Dick's son and grandson are using wooden wedges and wooden mauls to split the spruce tree, and then once they've been split down and shaped with crooked knives, then you can see the slats, and in the picture on the right, they're forming the funnel, measuring it to make sure it's big enough to fit onto the fish trap. And then here is a photograph of the completed fish trap. And so this fish trap is now in the permanent collection of the Anchorage Museum, and we're very excited that we were able to completely document the entire process from start to finish, and see how it's done, and also to make sure that this knowledge is not lost, since very few Dena'ina people still have the know-how to make something like this. A 330-page catalog was published by the University of Alaska Press in conjunction with the exhibition. It contains essays on Dena'ina history and culture and several hundred photographs. It's available online from the Anchorage Museum and at our gift shop. And so, again, I can't cover everything in my talk here today. So if there's anything in particular that you want to know more about, I'd highly recommend that you take a look at the book. It's really going to be a fantastic resource moving into the future, and I would hope that hopefully every library in Alaska will have a copy of it if they don't already. So to find the Tools for Teacher section, go to the Dena'ina exhibition page on the Anchorage Museum's website, select For Educators, then Tools for Teacher link. For a free DVD copy of the site, call the museum at 907-929-9280. Also, a smaller version of the exhibition will travel to 3 locations in Alaska, including the Pratt Museum this summer. In closing, I'd like to thank the Dena'ina advisors, elders, and community members who contributed to this exhibition, also the donors, collaborating organizations, and lending museums. And I thank you for joining in on this presentation. So with that comes my favorite part of the evening, and that is questions.
I have a question.
Okay.
And we're here in Glen Allen. Where did you say that this is going to be traveling to?
We have the Pratt Museum in Homer confirmed for this summer, and then after that, our hope is that it'll travel to the Kenai Visitor Center in Kenai, and we're in talks to have it go up to Fairbanks.
Thank you.
Yep. We got plenty of time for questions. So like I said, I love questions.
I have a question.
Yep.
Here in Copper River Valley, or in our area, they have what they call the Great Dying Off, where the smallpox, came into this area. Was that a problem with your Native group also?
Yeah, absolutely. From 1836 to 1839, half the Dena'ina population was wiped out by smallpox. So, like I said at the beginning of the presentation, there were probably 4,000 to 5,000 Dena'ina pre-contact. By about 1840, that number was down to about 2,500. The numbers slowly started to rebound or stay flat for most of the 19th century, and then the 1918 flu epidemic probably had another impact of taking another half the population. So by about the time my grandmother was born, around 1933, the Dena'ina population was somewhere in the neighborhood of 1,000, maybe 900 to 1,000. Today, the population obviously has rebounded, and now we estimate the Dena'ina population to be over 2,000.
Thank you.
I'm down here in Homer, and I have a question. You said that people have been in those areas for like over 1,000 years, but here in Ketchimak Bay, and we have an expert here. I was going to ask her, but I thought I'd just have this discussion with all of you. The expert's Janet Klein, by the way.
Yeah,
I mean, in Ketchimak Bay, haven't there been people around here a lot longer in Ketchimak Bay area?
Certainly, yeah.
So
yeah, but trying to ascribe what we would say, there's a lot of work that needs to be done on coconut archaeology. I mean, we do have quite a bit. We have some bit of knowledge, especially in Ketchimak Bay, but there's a lot that still remains to be done. So the point of this isn't that the Dena'ina claim that we've been here since time immemorial. We've always acknowledged the fact that we moved into this area, that we came from the north. But what I always like to say, when you think about recorded human history, 1,500 to 1,000 years is a long time. What was going on in 500 AD or 1,000 AD? I mean, that's a significant period of time. But yeah, you are correct. There were cultural groups that were here before the Dena'ina, certainly.
Thanks.
Did you want to add anything to that, Janet?
No, thank you, Aaron.
Okay. Any other questions? Don't be shy.
I have a question, just curiosity. A few years ago, I made connection with a young woman whose mother had grown up in the Eklutna village at the same time that I was growing up in that same area, and with whom I was a school companion. And she told me about a usage. She was talking about a garment which her mother was making for her, which she called a going home dress. Do you know, and going home shoes? Do you know anything about that? I'd never heard that expression before. And what it was she had worked in caribou hide or moose hide, a garment, and beaded it and decorated it. And I asked the young woman, how would you use this dress? What will you do with it? She was excited because it was almost ready. It was almost ready for her to use. And she said, well, I use it for potlatches and for ceremonial occasions, but it will be my burial gown. And so that's the going home part of it. And I thought it struck me as a really interesting expression, and I'd never heard it before. Do you know anything about that? I mean, have you ever heard that? Is that something that, or maybe, I don't know, this was a woman, as I say, her mother was a Eklutna village of the Alex family, and I was just curious if anyone had ever heard of that before. I thought it was a lovely concept myself, just really a beautiful concept.
No, I don't think I've heard of anything quite like that. No.
Okay, I was just curious because I said I had never heard it, and I've studied a bit about and been in Alaska a long time, and it was a new thing for me, but I thought it was quite impressive, and I was just curious if it was a part of the culture that was known or not.
No, I'll have to ask about it. My relatives are the Alex family, so I wondered who it was. But no, I've never heard of that. I mean, I know certain people that have made articles like that, and they say they want to be buried in them, but not specifically.
Yeah, and she called it my going home dress, and she said she's already made my going home shoes, and I have them, and they're I've had them for a while, and I just thought it was neat. Okay, well, thank you. That was my question.
No, I'm going to ask about that. That's interesting.
Yeah, great.
Still got plenty of time for questions. So.
Why do you think it took so long for us to get to this point of having this marvelous exhibit, which unfortunately I was not able to get up to Anchorage to see, and I'm so excited that you're bringing at least part of it down to the Pratt Museum, because I'm of that generation of Alaskans who, my family came here in '47. I was still small, went all through school here, through high school, and we learned nothing at all about our Alaskan neighbors and Native people. And as I said, I went to school with members of the Alex family. I had no idea about anything. And I had to leave and go away and study, and then discover that I had this incredible cultural richness in my own state, which I really have always been sort of annoyed about, that I had to grow up not knowing about these things. And I was so excited about what you have done to pull together this wonderful exhibit. So important.
Yeah, I mean, I was born and raised in Anchorage, and it was the same thing for me. I'm not that old. I'm only 32. And yeah, it wasn't until I got out of high school and I started working at the Alaska Native Heritage Center. But it always bothered me as a kid. I mean, I knew that I was Dena'ina Athabascan, but I would tell people that I was Dena'ina, and they'd say, "What's that?" And I'd say, "Well, we're the native people of Anchorage. We're the indigenous inhabitants." And people would say, "Well, I didn't know natives lived here." And when I knew we had a huge problem with that was when I would tell other Alaskan natives that they had no clue. People that had moved from different communities around Alaska, and you would think that they would be a little more in tune to who the other Native people would be, but it wasn't the case, and so it always really bothered me. And but to answer your question, I think it's a combination of factors. I think it's I think one, the Dena'ina had contact with Europeans for all of the 19th century, and a lot of the material culture, especially the summer clothing, was quickly replaced by about the 1850s, 1860s. They were wearing Western clothing, so in some circles it would look like they were, they'd become westernized, and that they were eventually going to sort of disappear. But, I also think that, Anchorage isn't even to its 100th anniversary. We're coming up on the centennial next year. But, when I was growing up here, I mean, the history starts in 1914, 1915 with the founding of the Alaska Railroad. And in some ways, it was like an extension of Manifest Destiny. It was the last northern extension of Manifest Destiny. That, the other thing is that, as I mentioned earlier, that 1918 flu epidemic, which was brought into this area by all the influx of people moving here to work on the railroad, wiped out half the population. I know in some of the communities, the population virtually disappeared within a very short period of time. And I know I've seen oral accounts and written accounts of that, flu epidemic. And I think in one day, Shempete, who was a young man, he lost his mother, but he helped bury somewhere between 15 to 20 people in just one day. So, so the numbers took a hit. They were dressing in Western clothing, and I think that people didn't really care. They didn't think that, we were going to be around, or that, if we had any history, it was in Eklutna. But, the population, of South Central Alaska and Anchorage in particular, I mean, it's just, it's explosive growth. I tell people that when my grandmother was born in 1933, Anchorage had a population of about 5,000. When my mom was born in 1957, Anchorage had a population of about 90,000. When I was born in 1981, Anchorage had a population of about 180,000, and today we have 300,000. So, when you compare the 300,000 to the, maybe living in Anchorage, 600-700 Dena'ina, it's not a very big number. And I think that, also with all that change, a lot of people were so busy just trying to adapt because their way of life was completely changed incrementally. It didn't happen overnight. But places where people had Dena'ina fish camps, for example, just to give you a good example, actually, as I'm standing here thinking about it. So right now, I'm at the Alaska State Library offices here, and not probably about a block from here stands the Hilton Hotel. And there was a Dena'ina elder by the name of Bill Ezai. When he was a young man in the 19-teens, maybe up through about 1920, they used to go moose hunting right here. And he was interviewed in the 1960s, and he said, I used to hunt moose right where I'm standing right now. But, all these, they put in the roads and the hotels and all that, and, it sort of ruins the hunting. From where I'm standing, there were Dena'ina fish camps, just down the hill. But, as the town grew, we were sort of pushed from one place to another, and by World War II, there were no spots in the Anchorage Bowl that we could fish, with the exception of out at Fire Island, and that was severely restricted. So, I think all those factors are combined to why people didn't know that Dena'ina people lived here. So it's starting to change. Now at least when I say I'm Dena'ina, at least hopefully I'll get, oh, you guys are the Indians that used to live here. And I'd say, well, we're still here, but at least you recognize we used to be here. Because that's completely different than 10, 15 years ago.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine Ship Creek being fish camp area, and I, was 55 years old before I discovered that, and I grew up here, it's like,
right.
What? It's a big gap
Yeah.
there, but anyway, thank you. Thank you so much for having this happen, having this pulled together, because it's so important, very important.
Any other questions?
I have a question again. Will you be coming down to the Pratt when they bring the exhibit here?
Yeah, that's the plan. That when the exhibit opens, we'll have a series of we'll have an opening reception, I would imagine, and some programming associated around it. We don't know exactly what it's going to be, but yeah.
Right.
Coming down to Kachemak Bay in the end of May or beginning of June, you don't have to twist my arm.
We'll be glad to see you for sure.
Anything else? Last chance. Okay.
What was your
well,
name? I'm sorry.
guess-
Your name?
What? Oh, my name, Aaron Leggett.
Okay, thanks, Aaron.
Yep. Last chance. Forever.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you,
thanks.
Shanann.